Hello, welcome to IDDTalks here at AD University. My name is Anastasia Lavrina, and in this episode, we are going to talk about the upcoming visit of the Vice President of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, to the South Caucasus. Joining me now from the United States is Glen Howard, President and Chairman of Saratoga Foundation. More welcome.
Thanks for having me again, Anastasia.
Thank you so much. So on January 24, President of the United States, Donald Trump, announced that U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance will travel to Azerbaijan and Armenia in February 2026. Definitely the first and most of all idea of this visit is to build on recent peace efforts and advance the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. So I'd like to start our conversation with a basic question. How significant is this upcoming visit to Azerbaijan and Armenia?
Well, I think it's highly significant because of the importance of Armenia and Azerbaijan. And as you know, no U.S. vice president or president has ever visited Azerbaijan. And so the same with Armenia. So there's not a level of recognition by the United States because for over a decade, Georgia was the favorite. And certainly in the Bush administration, President Bush visited Georgia. So Georgia has always been kind of the darling when the U.S. was focused on the Caucasus. Georgia was always very the centerpiece of it. Now, the centerpiece of U.S. attention is now Armenia and Azerbaijan, and for all the good reasons. And I think that this is very important. I think for Azerbaijan, it's certainly significant. And I'm very excited and very happy for the people of Azerbaijan to have a visit by a U.S. vice president. And if someone would have asked me when the Trump administration was elected, if a U.S. vice president would be going to Azerbaijan, I would have said, no, I don't think so. And so here we are. And so the world can change. And I think the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, the Trump corridor, is having a big role on that because of the United States is now thinking about connectivity in the region. And so, and I think that the visit to Armenia by the vice president also has very important repercussions for Azerbaijan because before you asked me to be on the program today, I was thinking about how important is this visit and why it matters. And I think that the key thing is that the corridors are changing. The geopolitical corridor that we have known for 20 years has really been built about Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, the Kars Tbilisi Railway. In other words, it's been in terms of transportation, it's always been oriented around about Georgia. Now it's completely being reoriented towards air travel, potential road traffic, and railroad through the Zangezur corridor.
Mr. Howard, but why does it significant for Azerbaijan?
Is that I think that the visit of J.D. Vance will do a lot to help Pashinyan domestically as he faces the parliamentary elections this spring. And that actually strengthens his position. It strengthens his position against the Kocharyan group, the groups inside Armenia that favor Moscow. It helps strengthen Pashinyan domestically so that this can help affect, if he wins in the parliamentary election, then we all expect that something will be done constitutionally to the Armenian constitution that will allow it to make the changes that Azerbaijan wants to be made in terms of the finalizing of the peace agreement. Because you got to put your faith in the written word, not just in words. And I think that J.D. Vance's visit really underscores that. It helps Azerbaijan regionally in the overall strategic picture. It puts a U.S. flag in Zangezur, where the United States is going to be playing a role inside Armenia. And all of this will be at the expense of Russia. As you know, Russians control the Armenian railway. They have the border guards on the border. And Armenia has said that it's going to put its own forces now on the border. They have to work through this with the Russians. So the Zangezur corridor is really going to be evolving and developing. And all this is good news for Nakhichevan. as Azerbaijan builds ties with Nakhchivan through the Zangezur. It puts American companies inside of Armenia, again, all at the expense of the Russians. And so you also have reports that Turkey is going to reopen, have direct flights between Yerevan and Istanbul and Ankara. So the whole trade flow is rechanging. Armenia is now accepting payments from Azerbaijan for overflights, for transportation through its airspace. All of this is taking a very positive trajectory, and I never would have expected this now.
Well, Mr. Howard, you offered a very insightful analysis and mentioned Georgia, as well as the evolving United States approach towards the South Caucasus. Recently, some experts have been questioning what Georgia's role might look like after the launch of the Zangezur corridor connecting Azerbaijan with the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic through the territory of the modern Armenia. How do you assess Tbilisi's position in this new regional reality? And more broadly, should we expect the United States to develop a comprehensive strategy for the South Caucasus as a whole? Or will Washington continue to pursue a more individual approach towards each country here in the region?
I think that you're talking about the geopolitics, the political dimensions to it. And I think that once the United States gets involved with the transportation element, the promotion of peace, the idea of connectivity between these regions, that it won't really matter for Georgia because I think the political side will come along. It basically also shows the Georgians that they don't get a vote in determining the transportation dimension. You don't want to be overly dependent on one corridor and at the hands of the Russians who are sitting in South Ossetia and can anytime can march down the road and cut off the east-west connectivity of Georgia. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but there is that threat. So what this does is that basically tells Georgia that it doesn't really have a decisive veto anymore, or it tells the Russians they don't have a decisive veto because Azerbaijan is moving in this direction with Armenia, and the history of the geopolitics of the South Caucasus is that all of you as countries have been held hostage by geography and land. Azerbaijan has this transportation dilemma that it's tried to get out of since independence. And so it's now building the roads and networks with Zangilan and through Zangezur, hopefully. So you've been prisoners of geography. And so what's happening now is that the political side of it is changing. And that will make basically Georgia a little bit more sensitive to Azerbaijan's concerns. And here's another element too that I want to emphasize is that the United States now hopefully people and policymakers in the United States will begin to recognize that Azerbaijan is becoming not just a middle corridor, but also a middle power. And this is a very important geopolitical concept that's being discussed now, what they call the rise of middle powers. And Azerbaijan is becoming a regional power in the Caucasus that is getting a big vote. And the more that President Aliyev interacts with the United States and senior U.S. officials, meeting in Davos is always important. But the more they interact, the more that the mental mindset changes and how they look at you. And they say, oh, Azerbaijan, they're becoming a really important player, partner of the United States. Not just in the Caucasus, but the Caspian region. They're doing all these great things in Central Asia with the Organization of Turkic States, Uzbekistan, and so basically a regional bloc is starting to appear, kind of like a European Union for the middle corridor, and to where that you're taking control of your own destiny. And I think that President Aliyev has shown a great vision for kind of how he wants this region to go. Now, the United States is going to be determining a vision because it thinks that it's going to be in Armenia and Zangezur, and it's going to be telling the Chinese that it controls some of the trade going through there. And that's going to be a geopolitical temptation for the United States to want to kind of regulate the north, south, east, west control of trade and traffic by sitting in Zangezur and in Armenia by playing the role there. But I don't think that that's what they want. But I think that, everybody sees Iran and the problems inside of Iran, China's role in terms of controlling the trade and transit through the Belt and Roads initiative. So all of this, I think is all possible because Azerbaijan has invested so heavily in the port of Baku and building its east-west and north-south transportation infrastructure to make it very indispensable in the region. But it's also built itself up militarily. And so I'm excited that maybe, that the United States will be able to engage more as a military partner of Azerbaijan. The more both sides of the United States develops with relations with Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I do note that, President Pashinyan has actually decreased the Armenian defense budget this year, which is interesting. And a lot of his critics inside of Armenia are saying, well, how can you dare do this? Well, I think Pashinyan looks at the region. He's looking at it through the prism and the lens of economics and peace and prosperity in the same way that the United States is looking at the region. So,
Mr. Howard, Azerbaijan was invited to join the U.S. Initiative Board of Peace as a founding member. The official ceremony took place in Davos during the Economic Forum with the participation of the heads of the states. So what does the decision signals about Washington's assessment of Baku's role in regional stability and reconstruction efforts?
Well, it certainly is very important for Azerbaijan, and it shows that your role as a country is evolving. I know that you're not going to participate in Gaza peacekeeping, but the United States approached you and talked to you, and that's a recognition that your influence is goes beyond just the Caucasus. And so going back to your question, I think that the United States sees a role for itself that's changing in the region and wants to build. There's discussion of Westinghouse building a nuclear reactor to replace the old Soviet nuclear reactor in Armenia, and so I think that the role of the United States is changing in the region, and it's certainly leading to what a U.S. flag being put in the middle of the South Caucasus, which upsets the Russians. But, Anastasia, the Russians just had to leave Kamishli Air Base in Syria. Their role in the South and the Middle East is changing, and to where that they no longer have an imperial presence in the Middle East or in the Eastern Med. It's an empire in retreat. And so in its place are new middle powers like Azerbaijan that are appearing that can become, and I'll use the word regional policemen. That is a term that the United States used for Iran in the 1970s after it left Vietnam and it lost the Vietnam War, it withdrew. And so what they said is American power cannot be everywhere. So we needed to rely on regional allies to step in and play very important roles. And I think geopolitically, the United States has said, well, we're not going to be involved everywhere. But what they will do is help countries become regional policemen. And I think that the discussions of the United States providing assistance, there's rumors that they may lift the arms embargo against Azerbaijan, are all beneficial because this administration looks at dollar and trade figures. It looks at the amount of investment that a country makes, like Azerbaijan, in the United States or in Turkey, but certainly their ability by being on the Board of Peace is very important. Now, the other element about the Board of Peace I would like to emphasize.
Mr. Howard, that's indeed very, very interesting. So how should we interpret Donald Trump's current actions and strategic direction?
Is that what President Trump is doing is he's replacing the United Nations. And he is now creating an alternative body that will become like a very governing power of sorts that in the world that will now kind of replace the outdated role of the United States or the United Nations and will give those countries at the board of peace a different role. He's also probably trying to look for a job for himself after 2028 when he leaves. But this is really important because the United States and many conservatives in the U.S. do think that the United Nations is outdated and that the Russian vote and Chinese vote in the Security Council are give them too much power. And I think that President Putin hasn't really jumped at the opportunity to get on it because he says, well, we'll take the money from that's in our frozen bank accounts in Belgium and use that towards getting on the board of peace. In other words, he doesn't want to pay the money. And I find that to be very interesting. And the fact that China's not going to be on the board of peace, too, is another interesting geopolitical dimension. So I would look at the board of peace and how it evolves. It certainly is a kind of vision and a roadmap for the future for the United States. Now, again, President Trump not going to be around. I mean, he steps down in 2028. But the guy who's coming to Baku in 2028 could be the president of the United States. So I would look at his visit to Baku is really cementing a positive trajectory in the minds of the people in this administration that may be around. JD Vance and Rubio are going to be around in a next administration, and so it's an investment in terms of the vision of how the United States evolves, and certainly he'll have positive memories from his experience in Baku and in Armenia. And so it's creating a kind of a new model for how the United States deals with Azerbaijan and the South Caucasus. So, it's really changed in the last 10 years. I just can't say enough in terms of how the world and the map has changed. For Azerbaijan, it's really becoming at the forefront. Very excited for your country.
Well, Mr. Howard, thank you. Thank you so much for joining IDDTalks.
Okay, Anastasia, thanks for having me again.